Alrighty, so welcome to week 2, Cycle, Sync, and Chisel. This week we will be, is that gonna work? There we go. This week we'll be going over discussing exactly what cycle syncing is. Last week we kind of touched base on it a little bit. This week we're going to go in depth and we're going to understand why it works, how it works, why it works. I think understanding your why in everything, like why did you enroll in this course? Why does cycle syncing work? I think that that's super, super important to know. We will go over the golden nuggets of what you need to know in order to be in the flow. We will go into the 3 steps of cycle syncing. So after we discuss everything, it'll make more sense to then kind of, conceptualize or summarize what exactly the 3 steps of cycle syncing are. And I believe you should have already received the handouts. The handouts will go over, but it's just a nice little way to present yourself with a list of suggested things to consume for each phase of your cycle. And we'll get to that at the end. Alrighty, so what exactly is cycle syncing? It is a practice of choosing behaviors and activities that nurture you, your body, and your mind while allowing you to excel based upon what's occurring biochemically and physiologically. That's always a tough word for me, but cycle syncing is taking into account where you are in your cycle and knowing where you can excel based on neurochemistry and based on what's happening in your body, choosing to live in sync with that. So excelling in the moments that you can with what you can and letting other things kind of not go by the wayside, but not prioritizing them for the time being until the correct time to prioritize those things comes along. This can be very, very scary for anyone who's type A, who thinks that we need to have everything, on a schedule to a T and not wanting to break from that schedule. But cycle syncing basically goes against that. You shift the way that you do most things in life. You still get it all done, but you do it in a different fashion, a different manner. Cycle syncing also very, very much so involves your food selection, and your food selection is going to take into consideration food energetics. So food energetics, like literally everything has energy. So when we think of food energetics, we know that certain foods make us feel really, really good, right? And then other foods don't make us feel our best. There's a time and a place where I'll use ice cream as an example. Like I love ice cream. I know ice cream doesn't usually make me feel my best, but there's a time and a place where I'm like, I really just want to enjoy it. I know I usually kind of feel kind of sluggish afterwards. That would not have a positive energetic, right? Doesn't mean I don't partake in it, but I just carefully select the times when I partake in foods that don't have like good energetics. We want to be fulfilling most of our diet with very, very, very high energetic foods that leave us feeling our best. The other 2 pieces for food selection are micronutrient support. So think, like coming to mind right now are zinc and iron. So when we're bleeding, we tend to be a little lower on zinc and iron. So finding food sources that have those micronutrients that can help re-support you, okay? And just to clarify, macronutrients are carbs, proteins, fats. Hopefully we're tracking protein after week 1. And then micronutrients are all your vitamins and minerals, okay? The other piece is estrogen metabolism. So we kind of touched on this last week a little bit, but we definitely want to make sure that any excess estrogen is being metabolized and excreted. And we run into issues when we have estrogen dominance, which most of the time is a result of our pathways of elimination not running efficiently. So anything from the liver to the small intestine, the large intestine, the skin, these pathways of elimination, these points of elimination, something in there is not working properly. And so estrogen can't fully leave because the body does produce, so the body produces estrogen, and we know that there's a flow, right? It dips. All of our hormones, they rise, fall. When we aren't able to accurately or efficiently flush out the estrogen as needed, we come into estrogen dominance. And so we want to make sure that we're eating foods that support the breaking down and the excretion of estrogen. The other two pieces that go into cycle syncing are exercise selection. So we want to make sure that we're choosing exercise, movement, activities in the physical world that support us for where we are in our cycle. Again, tail end of luteal, so about 4 to 5 days before your bleed, you naturally, if you tune into it, you're most likely a little, I don't want to say lethargic, but energy does dip a little bit, okay? First few days of your bleed, that might also be the case. Some of us feel actually really, really great the first few days. So it's all very individualized there, but we want to make sure that we're choosing exercises that support us, okay? And we want to apply that as well to lifestyle. So if we can, easy for me as I'm my own boss, but we want to try to work in ways that, again, support where our neurochemistry is, like where our brain chemistry is based on where we are in our cycle. And we'll get into that for each phase of the cycle here coming up. Quickly, I would like to touch base about the myth that we must do everything, on a regimented schedule, right? When we do that, we tend to become super frustrated and we have mood swings and we beat ourselves up. We need to rewrite how we imagine like our days need to be. We don't need to do it all every single day. And that's where this flex of cycle syncing comes in. You'll learn how to adjust your schedule to support you in the best way to have your best performance throughout your 28-day cycle, okay? All right, so why does it work? This is kind of what I just spoke of, but we are not static beings. Like as a society, we believe that we're supposed to just like rinse and repeat every single day. And again, if that doesn't happen, we get disappointed, unhappy, usually resentment. And with cycle syncing, we can begin to identify and listen to our own internal cues and then make informed decisions that, again, lead to a better quality of life and inherently better work performance, productivity, performance in the gym, better relationships, better communication, right? All of these things. It's a pretty fascinating little system. I am not the creator of it. Lisa Vitti is who I study under, and she's the creator of this. She considers this embodied time management, and I couldn't agree more. I feel very, very strongly that this is exactly what that is. It's embodied time management. I've said the word neurochemistry a few times, but it's important to know. So neurochemistry changes day to day based on where your hormone levels are, okay? And when your neurochemistry is shifting day to day, that is going to be affecting you emotionally and mentally, right? So again, understanding where you are in your cycle, you can come to expect what your neurochemistry is going to be presenting for that day. Am I going to want to communicate, or am I going to want to kind of retreat and be a little bit more inward? Am I going to want to tackle big, huge, difficult problems, or is today more of like a artsy, creative day? Okay, all based on neurochemistry. And the cool thing is your cycle is literally your roadmap to that. When we're talking about all of this cycle syncing, this is going to be a bit of a slight repeat, some of this from last week, but we have 5 hormones that we are always going to be circling around. So it's estrogen, progesterone, luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, and testosterone. And again, it's the varying levels of all of these hormones throughout your 28-day cycle that are impacting you neurologically, right? Your neurochemistry, and of course, physically, but also mentally and emotionally. This we all know. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty. Take what you want from this. Each of these phases of your cycle will start with, again, what's happening in that part of your cycle. And then we'll go into, and so that'll be the hormone piece, right? Then we'll go into vessel. Vessel is what's happening in your body, like body feels, okay? And then we go into headspace. So again, what's happening mentally? How are you, like, are you prone to feel a certain way emotionally? Are you going to want to be communicative? Words are hard today. How to nourish your body, which everyone really loves being told, like, you know, what to eat, suggestions of what to eat. Take it with a grain of salt. But then also we'll finish up each section with movements. So recommendations on how to move your body. So here we are, starting again with follicular phase. So the hormones involved here, we've got follicle stimulating hormone and a bit of estrogen. Follicle stimulating hormone is sent to the ovaries, and we release another egg. The egg follicles begin to swell, and estrogen rises, which begins the process of thickening the uterine lining. When you are in your follicular phase, all of your hormones are at their lowest, okay? I think that is worth noting. Body-wise, so in your vessel, your energy starts to increase. So you just came from your bleed. Sometimes people, women, when we're bleeding, sometimes we feel a dip in energy. Not everyone, but I feel like it's fairly common, and that's not a negative, like a bad thing. Nothing is wrong with you if you're feeling that. Your body is going through a tremendous process, right? Once we step into follicular, our energy starts to rise. When we get to ovulation, it's as high as it's going to be, right? So it's a slow climb. When we talk about vaginal secretions, at this point, there's very little, okay? And so just like your blood can tell you a lot about your body, so can your secretions. So it's very important to acknowledge what's happening in terms of your secretions. And those can also be one of these internal cues to let you know where exactly you are, okay? So at this phase, there's little to none, but towards the end, as you're getting closer and closer to ovulation, it's going to change or present as either like yellow or white and slightly sticky or tacky. Headspace, you're feeling real creative after your bleed, okay? So this is a good time to brainstorm or to start new projects. And keep in mind, this applies to everyone. You could be a CEO, you could be a jewelry designer, you could be a personal trainer. This is the time to start to think of those new projects that you want to take on, okay? Like even just writing things, brain dumps, right? Get it out. Maybe do something like actually like artistically creative, like paint, create a craft, something of the sort, but it doesn't have to be that. It could also just be like, I'm going to start writing a book, or that's a big endeavor. That's a big one, writing a book, but I think you get the picture. At this point, mentally, we're feeling pretty sharp, upbeat, outgoing, and revitalized, okay? And this is also a time when we're pretty good at problem solving. So in a perfect world, you would save your problem solving for your follicular phase. I say that with a smile because it's not probably possible all the time, right? But if there was a chance for you to do so, this would be the time to go into like tackling those really challenging like mental hangups that you have, okay? Work-wise, personal, whatever. You're also really open to new experiences at this time. So it's a great time to meet new people. If you were dating, this is a good time to be dating. Taking on new classes, whether that's like fitness, which we'll talk about, or, you know, a pottery class or something of the sort, right? Cooking class. So that is a good time at the start of your cycle follicular, okay? And in movement, again, I just briefly touched on this, but great time to try a new fitness class if you're into classes. Also, you are pretty outgoing at this point, right? So instead of a workout just on your own, this is a great time to do workouts with a group. So whether it's group run, group hike, again, fitness classes, this is a great time to be doing those. You're also able to make neural connections a little bit easier during this time. And so when we're talking about movement, when we're learning new movement patterns, a new sport, a new dance, anything of the sort like that, right? This is actually a time where that happens a little bit easier. probably still not super easy. It's always kind of hard to learn a new pattern, but this is a time to do it. And this is also a time when your workouts can be a little bit more intense. Okay. Your body is like pretty primed and ready for intense work here. That does not mean do HIIT every single day of the week. I personally do not recommend doing HIIT more than twice a week, but that's my own personal recommendation after 10 years in this industry and seeing just how women's bodies handle HIIT. Okay, here's the fun part. Follicular food recommendations. So in general, we're looking to eat light and vibrant. So think lots of fruits and veggies, okay? And when I say light, it's just like not super heavy foods. Again, like energy dense, not so much. We want like nice light foods. Because your estrogen is currently like still low, it's going to be rising, but currently it's still low, you can handle foods with a higher phytoestrogen content. So that's pretty cool. So think of like your soys. This is perfect because you're vegetarian, right? But this is a time when your body can handle a higher phytoestrogen content, and there's plenty of foods, fruits and veggies that have higher phytoestrogen content. Also a good time to incorporate pressed salads and fermented foods like kimchi and sauerkraut. And when it says light cooking, again, we're not looking really to like deep fry anything. We want, or even roast. We want to just kind of keep things pretty light. So steam or like a light saute, nice light baking, grilling, okay? I don't think there's a need for me to go through all of the foods here, but I will say this list is not an end-all be-all. We could add to it for sure. These are just suggestions. And it's very, very important to know that, say you have like a food intolerance, don't eat the food, right? If you don't have if you don't personally like a food, but it's on this list, don't eat the food, right? You've got to make this work for you. It has to work for you. So take what you can from this list, and don't go to the grocery store and try to buy everything on this list for when you're in each phase of your cycle. One, you're going to waste food, and food waste is one of like my biggest pet peeves. So don't do that. Just pick a couple of things, okay? Just a couple of things. And then also try to eat in season to what is, in season in your area, right? Try not to buy things that are shipped from the other side of the world. Try to buy as much as you can that is like sustainably sourced, maybe perhaps regenerative agriculture. CSAs are all popping right now, right? So that's a great offering in all of our communities. The continuation of the list, or the list continues onto this slide, just with nuts, meat, seafood, and the other category is always pretty random. Again, I did not create this list. This list is a recommendation from Elisa. At some point, I will have my own recommendations added onto here. Interesting note: soft shell crab, super pricey. When I first got this list, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go get some crab. Crab is like $30 a can. It's kind of insane. But if you like smoked fish, you could do smoked trout. That's a great breakfast item. So yeah, there's that for follicular. Next, we move into your ovulatory phase. Okay, so hormone-wise, your follicle stimulating hormone is rising, and it does so rather quickly. Luteinizing hormone also rises, which causes the follicle to swell and burst. This is when your egg is released into the fallopian tube and travels to your uterus. This is also when you can kind of sometimes, if you are somebody who experiences pain during ovulation, it'll be on one side of your body, and that is the side of the body that has released the egg. Estrogen continues to rise, so that's going up, okay? Continues to thicken the uterine lining. And testosterone has a very quick rise, but then drops right before ovulation. And remember on the chart from last week, testosterone never really it doesn't even look like it does much. So it's a super subtle rise, okay? Body-wise, in your vessel, discharge definitely starts to increase, and that makes sense, right? Because it's trying to basically, catch sperm. We are reproductive beings, and the body is like, just give me babies. It's clear, slippery, and wet. And on the peak day of ovulation, you can tell that you are on your peak day of ovulation because your vaginal secretion will be stretchy. Literally, it's like a stretchy little web, okay? Once you've passed ovulation, discharge does start to dry, okay? And I did touch on this. You might get a little bit of pelvic pain as the egg is released, and you may also experience some slight cravings or a headache. And again, as we really start to master cycle syncing, it all comes from awareness, right? So knowing where you are in your cycle, knowing what foods to incorporate, doing that for about 3 months can help reduce all of these cyclical symptoms. So this could be a time where you're experiencing cravings and a headache, but hopefully after 3 months of applying these principles, these practices, that dissipates, that falls by the wayside, okay? Headspace, connection and community. We want to be super social, okay? Again, that makes sense because our body at this time is like, impregnate me. Let me meet all of my possible mates, right? So we are naturally way more into, community and socializing. You also have heightened communication skills at this time. So it's recommended that, like, say you want to have a talk with your boss, maybe you want to raise, this is a time to do so, okay? In relationships, when, if something has kind of been on the back burner in terms of like a pretty challenging conversation, this is a time to do so, okay? You can still move your body with quite a bit of intensity. You have the most energy that you're going to have throughout your whole entire cycle. So this is a time to get after it. Again, don't do a ton of HIIT, but personal recommendation, lift all the weights, build as much muscle as you can. Great time for group classes, great time to be incorporating, I just said weights, but also plyometrics and running. Yeah, truly just listen to your body. It'll tell you like it wants to move, okay? All right, foods to eat while you are ovulating. Because estrogen is floating around, remember it had risen, right? It helps stabilize your energy and your mood. I think estrogen gets a bad rap, but it's actually like, it's a super, super, like, it's very good to us. It's very, very good to us. Estrogen is what gives our skin like plumpness, right? Like fullness. And it's when estrogen drops that our skin gets like a little dry. It's dehydrated. It doesn't look as good. So estrogen is very good. You want to go easier on carbs and stick to lighter grains. And veggies and fiber are going to be super helpful in aiding in the elimination of excess estrogen, right? So again, estrogen is rising, but we do only need so much. So anything like we want to get rid of what we don't need, and things with high amounts of fiber will help with pulling them out of the system. Okay, and glutathione, that's a micronutrient that is found in fruits, and that's going to help support liver detox. Again, super important for estrogen metabolism. Okay. We'll talk about dandelion here in a moment, as well as raspberry. Those are going to come up on the next slide. But there are your grains, vegetables, fruits, and legumes. Not a lot of recommendations there for legumes, but some red lentils. And here are recommendations for nuts, meat, seafood. And then in the other category, interesting enough, she doesn't touch on alcohol any other time besides here in ovulation. And then also doesn't talk about coffee any other time except for in your menstrual phase. So I would like to personally do a little bit more research there. I'm sure you could have alcohol at other times as well, but dandelion tea and raspberry tea, those are two teas that can be super helpful. Not just during ovulation, but raspberry tea can help with really improving your cycle. And dandelion tea is super supportive of your liver. Okay, so if you are having any elimination issues, that'll be a chapter coming, or a lecture coming up. But if you are having any elimination issues, incorporation of dandelion tea can be really nice. And you don't need to do it just straight. It's not that bad of a taste. You can absolutely add honey or something of the sort if you'd like. Okay, luteal phase. This is when your corpus luteum has grown on the surface of an ovary. This produces progesterone. Obviously, if progesterone is being produced, it's going to rise. When progesterone has risen, that signals the uterine lining to stay intact, okay? And follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone stop. No more release of those, okay? So those start to drop. Estrogen is still on the rise, still going. At the very end of luteal phase, so right before your bleed, testosterone is going to rise. And again, testosterone on your bleed is going to be the highest it's going to be, okay? Great time for like PRs if you're feeling good. In your body, your energy will start to dip. I'd say your energy starts to dip again 4 to 5 days before your bleed. I wouldn't forecast that it's going to dip the moment you step into luteal. You could actually still feel pretty good in the beginning of luteal. Discharge wise, we're going to be going into a white or a yellowish discharge. And it's, again, sticky, but nowhere near as sticky as it was with ovulation. And it'll also like have like a dry appearance. And then it would also be totally normal if you had no discharge during your luteal phase as well. Here it says cyclical symptoms may present. That'll be your case of like PMS, right? So if you are still experiencing or currently experiencing any forms of PMS, it's going to start to show up here in the luteal phase, okay? Headspace wise, you are hyper aware, very like you can dial in your attention, and you're also seeking comfort. So this is when we want to start to pull inward a bit. We want to nest a little bit. To do things around your space, that's what we'll consider nesting as well, right? So all of a sudden the garage needs to be reorganized. The pantry, right? The under cabinet of the bathroom needs to be like all reorganized. You'll find yourself wanting to do those types of things, clean the whole office, paint the rooms during your luteal phase. And that's just a form of nesting, right? Even though you didn't get pregnant, you naturally still just want to nest, okay? You don't have to get pregnant in order to have this natural inclination to nest. The ratio of estrogen to progesterone makes you notice things that you normally wouldn't. I find that super, super interesting. So do you notice, and I think a lot of us chalk it up to PMS, like we get hypercritical. And is it us being hypercritical, or is it that we are just noticing things that we don't normally allow ourselves to notice? We've slowed down a little bit, right? When we slow down, we surely notice more than when we're running at this like super high pace, right, all the time. So take that also with a grain of salt. Like the things that you do notice during this phase, one, are they coming up a lot? Do they come up each time you enter the luteal phase each month? Is it worth having a discussion about if it's with somebody else, or is it something that like isn't really that big of a deal, but you do start to notice things that you don't normally, okay? Brain prioritizing admin type tasks, again, organization, right? We want to like all of a sudden like do all of our accounting and organize records and that kind of stuff. Back end stuff, this is a great time to do it. Checklist stuff, great time to do it. When I say here that this is a great time to prioritize self-care rituals, that's because you're home, most likely, right? You're not as social. You have more downtime. You have more time to nurture yourself. So go into that, allow space for that. Self-care rituals can be, I mean, there's so many, and it's all unique to you and what you are seeking and desiring. Maybe it's allowing yourself to go to a yoga class, a yin class. Maybe it is going for a facial. Maybe it is a manicure, pedicure. Maybe it's breath work, right? Could be anything that makes you happy, but that takes care of you, a little personal time. We've said this so much, but first half, you can still push in terms of your movement, but as you get closer to your bleed, 4 to 5 days out about, you want to definitely slow it down and not do any HIIT, okay? No HIIT around that time, for sure. We touched on that, and I will review. I want this to like be drilled home. Cortisol naturally is higher at this point, right? specifically 4 to 5 days prior to your bleed. If cortisol is already high, you don't want to add to it by stressing your body out with extreme exercise. You can still work out. Absolutely. Always work out, but just don't push it to where you can when you're in follicular or ovulation or the first part of luteal. Okay. Okay. So when we're in the luteal phase, we want to focus on B vitamins, magnesium, calcium, and fiber. Okay. B vitamins help promote progesterone production, which helps you keep sugar cravings at bay. Most of us hate ourselves when all of a sudden we just want all the sugar or we want all the snacks, right? So this is the blueprint for helping to stop that. Make sure you're getting enough B vitamins, okay? You could even do a quick Google search. What foods are high in B vitamins, right? And incorporate those. These foods here are high in B vitamins, but say you're at a grocery store and you're like, okay, I know I'm going to be bleeding soon, and I know I need to focus on B vitamins, magnesium, calcium, and fiber. You could just do a Google search and save yourself, right? All of this like not necessary worry in your head. Bloating comes up for so many of us. We can help mitigate that by focusing on foods that have calcium and magnesium. That combination, calcium, magnesium, helps mitigate water retention or fluid retention, okay? You can usually find calcium and magnesium in green leafy foods, okay? Fiber helps the liver and large intestine with elimination. We discussed that earlier. Very, very important for eliminating excess estrogen. Whatever estrogen our body hasn't utilized, we want it out, okay? We want it out. When we get into the lecture where we're going to talk about skincare a little bit, we'll talk about practices there that can also help with flushing out estrogen. Hint, it's a dry brush. So a dry brush can help, okay? This is when we want to bake or roast our veggies, and that's because it concentrates the natural sugars in those, and that helps with your energy dips that naturally happen because estrogen is starting to drop. Remember, estrogen in ovulation was helping keep our energy and our mood pretty stable, but now estrogen is going to start to drop. And so with that, our energy starts to drop. So if we can have some natural sugars from roasted veggies, that can help, okay? Complex carbs, AKA those roasted veggies, also are gonna help with keeping serotonin and dopamine where we want them to be. So again, talking about that neurochemistry, the balance of things in your brain, complex carbs are gonna help keep that pretty stable. All right. Again, I'm not going to go over each of those, the food lists there, but you've got those, okay? Good time to incorporate spirulina. So if you are somebody who, you know, if you're a morning smoothie person, spirulina in the morning could be really nice. Good time to do smoothies is during ovulation. That's when we're doing a lot of like, I'd say follicular phase as well, but mostly in ovulation, eating like really light. My computer, I'm gonna have to run, and I knew I forgot something, the battery. I need to go get that in a second. So, but anyways, raw and light during a bit of follicular and ovulation, and smoothies included in that, okay? As we set up for this slide, I'm going to run down and grab that so that we don't disconnect. I do apologize. You got it. All right. Sorry about that, but here we are. We're back. Okay, so menstrual phase. Progesterone drops as the corpus luteum is reabsorbed. This triggers the shedding of your uterine lining and you begin to bleed. This is also when estrogen drops. And the drop in estrogen is going to signal the body to begin sourcing for that next round of ovulation. As I briefly touched on, this is when the appearance of your skin definitely does change, and that's because of the drop in progesterone and estrogen. All of the foods that we discussed, if you are being mindful and starting to incorporate some of those recommendations, that is going to help with the appearance of your skin, as will staying hydrated. You can't just like flush yourself with a ton of fluids during your bleed and expect your skin to like just bounce back. It's a day in, day out process of like, what are you putting in the bank? Okay. All right, body wise, might actually feel pretty relieved, right? Once you start to bleed, some of us are like, oh, I finally feel better, right? If that's not you, that's okay. But some of us do feel a little bit more relaxed and like a bit relieved once we do start to bleed. And that is simply because estrogen has peaked and now it's gone, right? So once estrogen has peaked and it's starting to make its way back down, we can start to feel like a little bit more relaxed. This is where you could experience cramps, low back pain, fatigue, and cravings. But again, hopefully with the incorporation of cycle syncing, those things do start to diminish, and hopefully rather quickly. Okay. Headwise, self-analysis. Okay. We're still a bit inward, but we really start to think of how we could do things better. And it is recommended per Elisa, as well as in my own practice, I love journaling. If you are not journaling, try to incorporate a practice of journaling, especially during your bleed, and see what the common thoughts are that come up. And those common thoughts that come up, they'll come up month to month until you address them. They will. Each month they'll come up. This is when your left and right hemispheres are the most connected they're going to be. And this is like, it's allowing you to have like your truest connection to your gut, right? To your sacral center, to what needs to shift in order to put you where you want to be. Okay. You could think of that career wise, you could think of that relationship wise. As I say that statement, for me, certain things come up, right? So we all have our things that are heavy on our mind and whatnot. This is your time that you're receiving clear, gut, intuitive messages. So have a journal, write them down, right? See what the common threads there are, okay? Your instincts are telling you something. We, as women, some of us are like so good at listening to our instincts, and some of us are like such pros at ignoring them, right? Don't ignore them. Like, we are such smart, intuitive beings, way more than men, like way more. I'm not bashing men, but like our intuition is usually so spot on, and we've taught ourselves not to listen to it. And this is a practice. This is a chance to switch that. Okay. And it can be really scary to listen to your intuition and like not trust it. Like my gut is telling me this, but like I really like this person and I want to think the best. And it's like, just like, don't take action right away, but start to see what comes up. Okay. Body wise, rest. There's no need to push it right now, especially like, if you are experiencing cyclical symptoms, rest. Give your body rest. It's going through a pretty tremendous process right now. That being said, if your energy is there, you can absolutely, move your body. I'd still keep the intensity on the lighter end. But that being said, you could have your best lifts. If you're somebody who's looking for PRs, this could be a great time to try to hit those. Okay. And again, that's simply just because testosterone is a little bit higher and your estrogen is lower. Foods during your menstrual phase. This is when it's important for us to be looking to add the nutrients that were depleted back in, right? This is that micronutrient support specifically for this time of your cycle. You're going to be looking to add back zinc and iron. Those two, along with many others, but those two for sure. And you can actually get those from like sea-based plants and also seafood. So if you are a lover of seafood, this is your time. You'll see the list for seafood is quite big, but in terms of sea plants, we've got, I might be murdering the name here, but wakame, I think that's how you say it. And then kelp, hijiki, and I think there's one more on here, but sea plants. Go for sushi, go for nori, eat it up. Okay. Um, we're looking for water-rich fruits and vegetables. And again, that's just to replenish ourselves, right? With the estrogen being low, we're naturally a little bit more dehydrated. So we want to help rehydrate ourselves. And we would like to incorporate foods that have a lower glycemic index, okay? So this is where she says decaf coffee, she being Elisa. I think you can have, I think what she's trying to say is that you can consume coffee all other times. This would be a good time to be having decaf. Seafood list there is massive. Look at that. It's such a beautiful list. I love seafood. So get all the seafood if you're into that. The last piece on the foods here that I'd like to talk about is she recommends soups and stews. That's just because it's nice and easy on the digestive system. And again, the body's already going through a pretty radical process, right? So just giving the body a nice, easy path in terms of digestion. Okay, here we are. So how do we cycle sync? One, we're going to observe and become familiar with our cycles. So for 2 weeks now, we've talked about what's happening in our cycles. We don't need to know to a T exactly what's going on, but I think it's super helpful for us to know what's happening in our head, right? What's happening in our body, like realistic expectations of how we can show up in our training, in our workouts, in our social commitments, right? Observing, familiarizing ourselves with each phase of our cycle. Tracking absolutely helps. If you don't have a consistent cycle, that's where you're going to really want to be looking at those internal cues. So what does your discharge look like? Where's your head at? Where's your energy at? Most of the period tracking apps out there, you're able to, on a day-to-day basis, not just when you're bleeding, but you're able to track all sorts of symptoms, right? So that's an easy way to be tracking. Just log into your app and start to track exactly how you're feeling, okay? When it comes to step 2, practice and adoption. What that means is, for example, taking that list of foods and start practicing incorporating what foods you can for each phase of your cycle, okay? See what that feels like. See what it feels like to modify your training in accordance with your cycle, right? What does it feel like mentally, physically, emotionally to change your training? I know that's going to be so hard for so many of us, but you're not going to die if you pull back for a couple of days. It's 4 to 5 days, okay? We don't stop training. It's just different. It's just a little lighter. The thing is you got to trust that if you do that, you'll come back so much stronger, so much stronger. When we think of cross training for like really any sport, but let's say marathon, they don't run every single day, right? If they do, usually it leads to injury. So you incorporate cross training, right? You modify your mileage almost every single training session, right? It's usually not just like the same mileage for the full training program for a marathon, right? There's variation. So it's just cross training, right? Think of it that way. It's cross training. So you just kind of lighten your load a little bit so that you can push harder when you come back. Okay. What else do I want to say about practice and adoption? I think that's it. Mastery is putting it all together, right? Mastery happens about 3 months in, when you don't really need to, you might not need to check the app to see where you are in your cycle, right? You know, based on where your head's at, your level of patience, based on how you're sleeping, based on how your body feels, what foods to be incorporating. Print out the handouts, put them on your fridge, put them in your car for groceries, like when you go grocery shopping. Have the tools with you so that you can step into mastery. It doesn't happen overnight, but in about 3 months, you we'll have such a better grasp on like how this all works and how it's positively impacting you. Okay. Here are the handouts, and I believe you've already gotten this, Shayla. So essentially what I did is I just took those slides on the food piece and just made them into a sheet for each phase of your cycle. Again, put it on your fridge, incorporate what you can, don't worry about what you can't, and notice how you feel, right? Do you feel any different through incorporating these foods? When I started incorporating these foods, it just felt nurturing. It felt like my body could take a breath of like, ah, you're getting like, you're giving me exactly what I need right now. Like I feel well taken care of, right? And that just feels so, so good. You're not clueless about what to be eating. You've got a little roadmap right here, right? Perfect. So that is our lecture for today. Let me make sure there's nothing else that I would like to incorporate here. And just like a quick little summary, the 4 phases, right? They're your blueprint of how to organize your life. How realistic is that? It's not going to happen overnight. Give yourself 3 months, right? But your phases literally are going to be your blueprint, because now you know the depth of how it affects you. We've all felt it, but now you actually know like the why. Like, why do I want to like not socialize? Why am I like really revved up at this time? We now know, and you can like, you have the blueprint for how to organize your life now, right? That's what this cycle syncing is all about. Yeah. All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. We'll talk about any questions that you may have. For those that are watching this on demand, please reach out with any questions that you do have. Okay. Go ahead, print out these, the 4 PDFs here at the end, and start to really, again, during your bleed, journal. Start to prep yourself for like this journey that you're going to be going down, which is like, again, finding ways to nurture yourself and to help yourself excel in all areas of your life by taking your blueprint, the 4 phases, and organizing your life around it, right? Stop thinking that you have to do everything every single day. Give yourself some room to flow. Okay. All right. Recording stopping. And can I find it? Where is it? There it goes. Okay. Perfect.